This video I'm just going to take you through the process I went through as I was also completing this project. Now it may be helpful to have the handout that I created with the 9 different steps for completing this project, because I'm going to essentially go through those 9 steps here. So the first one, and I've offered no other explanation in writing on this presentation, the first one is just to listen to the text. Just sort of sit back, listen, or watch if it's a video, or if it's a text that only exists in writing, read through it. Don't try to do too much in terms of responding to an assignment or trying to complete some sort of final piece within your first reading. Just sit back and kind of get the idea of what's going on. Pick out different things. You can take notes if things catch your attention, but don't worry too much about really trying to do anything that's going to be used later, if that kind of makes sense there. So just kind of sit back and do that. The second one here, and I probably did mine in a little different order here. I think I did this after I did some of the outlining, but it's useful to start off with this, even if you may change it later. So here I have obviously the text name, which is obviously going to be important for us, the name of the speaker, and a general sense of the audience. So in this case, sort of the crowd that seems to already be supporters of the civil rights movement, etc. And the purpose is really important for all of these, and it's because this is how you can also evaluate how effective something is by how successful it is in achieving its purpose. So I give a sense of what that is here, and then you can also look at the genre in terms of what it is. So in this case, it's the speech. It's kind of a call to action type thing as well. The genre usually is going to be fairly self-explanatory in some of the contexts that we've looked at. Here's where I think it's going to be interesting for you to kind of see what my process is. So this is where in step 3, the main goal here is to understand the structure of it. So I suggested in those directions that you print out the text and that you mark sections and give heading titles to each of them, kind of like breaking it up so you can do this in manageable pieces. And you can see I just took a picture of when I was doing the King text. I printed it out afterwards, and I kind of pieced out. You can't really read it, but you can see different marks. I've kind of marked things on the side that indicate, okay, this is kind of a section. Here's another one. Here's another one, etc. So I kind of saw where he was doing different things, that there was something to separate it from other parts of the text, and then I used that and then I went back in and then I gave these sort of section headings, which you can kind of see here, like a place in history, injustice. So he's talking about that in general. So you can kind of see this throughout, and that allows me to really get a sense of the text and what we're looking at. Interestingly, or surprisingly, this was actually one of the more time-consuming elements when I was doing this, and for me it took I don't know, an hour or maybe more to go through and do this, but it's worth doing this early on to really figure it out, because if you skip to a later step without really understanding the text, it's hard for you to choose the section that really is a section that's different from the other ones, and 2, to see the larger context. So taking this step, whether you do this by printing them out or by doing it electronically, this really is the place to spend a lot of time and effort, because this is where you really get to see what the text is all about, at least in my experience. Now, once you do that, once you've marked out different section headings, this one is really easy, because then you just go through and you say, okay, I had place in history, I wrote that down, injustice, in Birmingham, right? These are just headings that I took from my notes, so that takes about 5 minutes, if that, to type it out. So that's pretty easy once you have that piece. Similarly, once you've gone through, created headings, and then created that outline, the summary actually doesn't take particularly long, at least not when I was doing it, because you kind of have the elements that you want to include in there, and it's just a matter of putting those into sentences and kind of explaining how they connect. Now, having said that, this is a really important skill, and if you're new to it, it will take more time to master. But a lot of this will be dependent on the difficulty you have with this will be dependent on how good your outline is to begin with. If you don't take the time to do a good outline, then this will be very challenging to do well. So now we move, and this is the idea that I'm getting at for this entire project, is you move from this big picture piece where you kind of see the different sections, you see the purpose, but that doesn't allow you to really focus in on something. And you can't do this for the entire text. So you need to choose a section that you found particularly interesting, you think you might have something to say about it, and that you blocked off or sectioned off from different pieces as sort of somewhat can stand alone, not entirely necessarily, but somewhat. So then you really do a close reading of that. You look at this text, you look at the word choice, you find patterns, and you do this very closely, and you can see examples of this, talking about this in the textbook, but also here. So this is some of my annotations, as you can see, when I was doing my section, and this was the section on the place in history, which was near the beginning of the text. And I was just marking off different pieces in there, so like what do the different examples mean, and then some of my comments in terms of like what he's getting at, kind of analyzing those different elements. So this is important. This is a close reading of this particular section, which requires different skills than the summary, but I would say equally important. Now you move, and this is step 7 on the list that I gave you, to really to writing about it. So you did those annotations, but you weren't necessarily annotating the section for the summary. You were annotating to kind of make interesting points. So now you look at this and you kind of you summarize that section, or you paraphrase the specific section. So in the text, it talks about the difference between summary and paraphrase. The big difference is a summary is basically a shortened version of it, right? You just give the key points, and a paraphrase could be of equal length to the original text, written in your own understanding, your own rendition type thing. So this can kind of be a mix, because your summary and paraphrase this section might actually be just as long as the text, depending on the length of the text, or it might be a bit shorter, or there might be some parts that are summarized and other parts that have gone into more detail. But the basic idea is that you're explaining what's going on in this particular section. You're not necessarily getting into the response part yet. So it's sort of like the original summary, but it's actually going to be longer, and it's going to be longer for a shorter piece of writing, because the summary was responding to the entire text. This is responding, the summary is summary of the entire text is looking at the entire text, and this is looking at a smaller section of text, yet your writing is going to be longer for this. But it's a useful piece. Now here comes sort of the I don't want to say the heart of it, but it is a very important part of college writing, which is being able to respond to something. So now that you've zoomed in on a specific section, you know where it exists in the text, now you can look at very minute things if you want and respond to them. And you know, you can look at the textbook and some of the other resources for ways to do this, but basically it's kind of like giving your opinion. I sometimes stay away from that term, giving opinion, but it's you're saying, I noticed this idea and this is what I think of it, or I disagree with this idea, or I agree with this idea, and here are my reasons for that. It's your sort of contribution to or connection to the text. Up to this point, you're not really giving your thoughts and your response to the text, though you could do that in the annotations, of course. So that's really what you can do here, and you'll see this type of writing is assigned to you throughout your college careers, where you say, I mean, it might be just a response piece of writing, or someone asking you, oh, you read this, what do you think of it? It might not be in writing, it might be oral, etc. And then the final piece, the final step here, is that you explain how the specific section works within the larger text. And this really allows you, well, at first let me say that this section, after doing all the other parts, shouldn't be that difficult, in the sense that you should already, by summarizing the entire text, and then by looking closely at a specific section, you should already have the necessary pieces to do this. You should already have them in your sort of in your brain, if you will. But this is where you just explain, okay, how does this section work within the larger one? What does this section do for the text? How does it fit within the larger argument? Does it do it effectively, or is it ineffective? And here's also where you can work in the idea of the purpose of the text, and also the audience, if you think that this is something that will be effective for that audience in achieving that purpose. So there's some evaluation here, and definitely analysis. And this allows you to really demonstrate your understanding of the entire text and the specific section, and to understand how text in general work and how arguments in general work, and your ability to articulate those things. So these are skills that are very important to have, and it's worth practicing them. And I hope this project allows you to do this, and you improve on these things as we go.